Plaintiff Diana Wade and her husband Timothy say their son lived with the defendant. However, they claim the defendant is so irresponsible that he doesn't even see the child he had before he turned 21. Diana says she was forced to pay the defendant's rent and utilities so her son wouldn't get evicted. So she's suing to get her money back. Defendant Marcus Akers says the plaintiff's son is just as irresponsible, if not more so, than Marcus. Marcus denies owing the plaintiff anything because he insists he upheld his end of the agreement, and he's countersuing for harassment.
Start with you.
Well, Judge, I come before you today as a mother of a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old. And just as I want them to be responsible and do the right things as an adult, I want the defendant here to be responsible, to stand up and, man up, do what your responsibilities are. My son and Marcus are friends, and, I see Marcus as really, I want to say, a 22-year-old kid who's really never shown responsibility as an adult. An example of this is that Marcus had a child before the age of 21, which is not unusual. I have several of my children's friends have had had kids before the age of 21, but unlike the defendant, they have grown up then. They have taken responsibility.
How do you know he's not being responsible?
Well, my son has told me that he doesn't see his child very often.
Did he say how often?
No.
My question is, we're going on your son's judgment.
Right.
He could see his son every other day, but your son might say, well, that's not enough, so he doesn't see his son enough. All right, good enough.
And another example of the defendant not being responsible is that in November of 2012, he was stopped for not having a driver's license, driving under a suspended license. He had to go to jail for the evening. His mother had to bail him out. That's just lack of responsibility, not making sure that you're...
Who told you that?
My son. And also he worked for my husband, so I know that he didn't show up for work during those times because he worked for my husband here.
All right.
And another lack of responsibility is that when he worked for my husband, sometimes he would come to work, shall we say, a little unshaven, unkempt, a little disheveled, looking like maybe he just rolled out of bed or was out partying the night before.
Did he come late or not perform up to par?
Once he was there, he did work, but
Was he there on time?
Was there on time, sir, but Your Honor, I just didn't feel like it was very much, not showing very well the respect for the job itself when you're dealing with the public to look like that.
He dealt with the public?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good enough. All right, sir, what do you want to tell me about yourself? At least you got a job and you go to work.
I have multiple jobs, first of all. But
multiple?
Multiple.
Doesn't sound irresponsible to me. Go ahead.
And second of all, I just feel like they're trying to bully people around and intimidate people into doing what they want. Their son just kind of doesn't put himself with the family at all. He doesn't really bring it up when we're around our friends. He doesn't bring up his family. He doesn't try to act like he's from money. He wants to just be like us, And honestly, I'm not going to be taken advantage of or made to pay something that I didn't owe.
Okay, we haven't gotten into the rent and electric bill that she's suing you about. I was letting you respond and give some background on your own.
And also about the not seeing my son. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir.
Go ahead.
About the not seeing my son, that couldn't be any more incorrect. Just because I don't live with my son's mother does not mean I don't see my son or support my son for that matter.
Okay. With regard to her son, do you want to tell me anything? This is your buddy. This is going home making you look bad to her.
They want to play me as this irresponsible kid when their son is just as irresponsible or even more irresponsible than me.
How so?
He doesn't understand what it's like to have to feed another mouth or put a roof over someone else's head. Or, for that matter, work for what you have. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a job or work, but he doesn't know what it's like to have to work for everything he has. I live on my own. I have lived on my own for years now. I worked with his son for a brief amount of time before he transferred stores, and I didn't look presentable enough or awake enough for work, however you'd like to word it. But if anything, her son is just as bad, or if not worse than I am. If they want to talk about my appearance or my upkeep for the company or for the public, I mean, if anything, he's come in looking just as scraggly or scruffy, whatever word you want to throw on it.
She's suing for rent. Did you all live together?
Yes, we did.
And what type of lifestyle did you all live?
I mean, we're two 22-year-olds, sir.
Right. And then he parties.
I'm not gonna say.
He parties too.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I didn't.
He doesn't go in the room and read the Bible.
Yeah, he doesn't go. He doesn't go sit in his room and sleep while we're all having a good
He sits there
time.
and parties with you. So I can believe he would come in a little disheveled with you.
Right.
Go ahead, man.
And I can say, my son, I know he's not. Believe me, he's not a saint. He's made lots of mistakes too. And
where's he at today?
He is working today.
Oh, okay. He's being responsible.
In Canton.
All right.
Work release.
Right.
Huh?
Work release.
Don't say
So
work.
far-
He said work release. No, I
So
know
far,
it's
not that, no.
Let's hear about the rent and electric bill you're suing him for.
Well, in February of 2012, both Marcus and my son were co-signers on a lease in an apartment for the rent of $545 each month. And also...
Each person?
No, total.
Okay.
So half for each. And the lease went through the end of February 2013. So consequently, at the end of November of 2012, Marcus moved out to live with his girlfriend in a different residence. Then in January and February of 2013, Marcus had promised to our son and to ourselves several times, right? He had told you he was going to pay.
Pay whom?
Pay his portion of the rent, the landlord, yes.
Why do you have to promise your husband he was going to pay the landlord?
Because he worked with him, and Tim had said, "Oh, are you going to pay?"
Okay.
We waited for him to pay. We tried to get in touch with him several times.
You waited.
Well, my
Did
son
you co-sign on the lease?
No. My son came to me and said, "Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do because it's a hardship for me. I don't
That
have."
sounds pretty irresponsible.
Well, he couldn't pay all the rent because it was together. He had his portion, but the leasing company would not take the half. They said it had to be all together. I had to pay it then because he paid his half of the rent.
He did, your
right,
son.
Yes. But
Okay.
he did not have Marcus's half of the rent because they were supposed to pay together.
All right.
So we waited for Marcus to pay. So then in January and also February, I paid Marcus's portion of the rent. So I paid his portion of the rent plus a late fee because we waited
Did
around.
he agree to pay you?
He had said he would pay, yes.
He
And
agreed to pay you?
he agreed to pay his rent to the landlord. He told Brian that
Did he
was
ever
gonna-
agree to pay you?
He had told my husband that several times that he was going to pay him because he sent him a letter.
Okay. Sir, let me hear your side.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to say that just because their son never gave them my part of the rent does not mean, first of all, that I did. The landlord or whoever they're trying to throw themselves in this mix.
You all owe the landlord.
Yes, we owe the landlord,
That's
but they're
why
trying
he
to throw
hadn't been paid,
themselves.
man. He didn't know who to pay.
They want to throw themselves in this
He's talking about
mix.
whoever.
They want to throw themselves in this mix and say that I owed them money, but I paid their son my part of the rent. We had an agreement on how the rent was to be paid out.
Every month?
Before I even looked at other places to live, we had completely agreed on how the rent was to be paid out the rest of the lease.
And you paid him?
Yes, I paid him cash monthly on what was supposed to be paid. My half of the rent out of $545 was $275 was what we ended up paying.
All right. What months are you alleging he failed to pay?
January and February of 2013.
Okay. And sir, did you pay those months?
Well, I would just like to tell you, in our part of me and Brian's agreement was that I would pay him for half of every month up until February, because that had been 4 months I hadn't been living in the residence after that. He was on his own for February's rent. We have an agreement. I have a witness statement right here saying that my girlfriend was there when we made this agreement.
Where were you all at?
We were in our apartment when we made this agreement.
Okay.
We were sitting in our living room talking like we do every day when we got off work.
And you say you have something in writing from your girlfriend saying what?
It's an email, but yes, sir.
Saying what? Pretty much.
Saying that Caitlin Gordon is her name.
It's your girlfriend. Brian Wade and Marcus agreed that Marcus would pay his half of the rent. February 1st, Brian would take over paying full rent because Marcus was no longer living at the apartment. The question is, ma'am, whether he told you he would pay you.
He told my husband that we have a letter that my husband had sent Marcus, and he had said numerous times
Sent Marcus.
that Marcus would pay him back.
Okay, let's see that. Sir, he told you he would pay you back.
Judge, he didn't specifically tell me he would pay me back. He said he would pay the money for the rent that was owed, because there were several visits when having owned the stores.
See, the problem is, he didn't have an obligation to you all unless he agreed to pay you all for stepping in.
He had
and
an obligation
helping.
on his lease, though.
I understand. So that's who he owed, the landlord, not you.
But I had to pay it because it was a hardship for my
But he
son.
would have had to agree to reimburse you.
Right.
If he runs out on his rent and just doesn't pay it, and then some guy off the street, whether it's you or some guy off the street, comes in and say, well, let me just pay that land. He may not even know the guy off the street. He said, oh, thank you. So thank him.
Well,
But I have another thing I'd like to say.
Let me allow her to finish.
Go
Your
ahead.
husband said he never overtly agreed.
well, we did not want our son evicted, so, somebody had to help pay the rent, so.
I understand.
And, neither am I obligated to pay the rent because it wasn't my
There
apartment.
you go. There you go. You weren't obligated one bit. He and your son were. So you're doing a favor for your son, not him.
Well, actually, I was doing him a favor, too, because he could have been evicted had he not paid the rent, and he would have gone through more expensive
Did he
court
ask
cases.
you to do the favor for him?
No, sir.
People can be deadbeats. Let me hear from you, sir, and your harassment claim for
Also,
$500.
yeah, he makes these claims that he just stopped in, but it's not like he just always just comes
Yeah,
in the
he did say
stores.
several times, sir.
Yeah.
You came to the young man's job several
I
times.
have, and he's not just like.
Oh, he owns the place?
Yes,
Yes.
sir, I do.
Well, he can come there as much as he wants.
No, I didn't say he couldn't show up as whenever he wanted. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just
He's
saying that
obligated to come in and observe.
Go ahead.
he's
sir.
making my work uncomfortable because I have people calling me all day asking why the owner of our company is calling asking for me, asking why he's showing up, leaving little notes for me.
Did you say because he's the owner and he has every right to ask for me?
No.
That's
And
what you
also,
should have told him.
they did not have my phone number. They got my phone number from our work
Your
log.
boss should have your phone
Okay.
number. As
Well-
much as I want to give you your money, ma'am, I have to go by the law. You all stepped in to save your son, to keep his credit cool, to keep him from being evicted. When people move in together, they risk all of that. He did not agree to pay you all. So therefore, both your cases are dismissed. Have a good day.
Me and her son have been friends the whole time, and we'll still be friends after this. We still play softball together twice a week.
Well, one thing I would like to say that Marcus doesn't play softball with our son on one team anymore because he was kicked off for not showing up for the softball. Marcus did tell our son several times that he would pay me back, and that
He
didn't
knew
occur.
exactly what he was supposed to do, and
Right.
he failed to do it again.